cardiovascular laboratory. So I'm going to go through a series of processes that we've learned that are very similar to creating consumer software, but the scale of the issue is larger. And it's very similar to creating enterprise software, but then again, the scale of the issue is larger also. So there's some things that are familiar and some things that are a little different. And I'm not saying the recommendations that I'm giving are in a linear fashion. There are bits and pieces. It's sort of like a menu of cards. You can choose the tools that are appropriate for the situation you're in, but you don't have to use all these tools. So this is what we've learned. One of the first things is you build a cross-functional team. A lot of situations come in like, oh, it's a designer. Everything is all built, and you just make it look great at the end. No, it's a cross-functional team from the beginning. That you have the business people who are saying this is a viable, usually business owners are saying it's a viable product in the marketplace. You have technical people saying it's a feasible, technically, it's a feasible product. And usually user experience says it's a desirable product. What we're finding working with a cross-functional team from the beginning, that these roles, the knowledges can overlap. Where I can have an engineer who has some of the best insights on how the end user wants to use the product that I've ever heard. And I've got user experience designers who can ask business questions or can ask technical questions like, wow, if we're going to present the screen in this way, can the database support it? So start with a cross-functional team from the beginning and think of expertise and interest, not titles. Because I'm a UX designer, I'm going to sort of think more about what UX is. Consider that user experience design is more than just the UI. We work both from the bottom up and from the top down. From the top down, sketching can help communicate to a team and to stakeholders what are early ideas and what you're thinking of. Working from the bottom up, we think about the value. How is this product going to help our end user? Thinking about the capabilities. How's this product, what is this product going to do? And then behavior. How are people going to interact with the industrial internet? We're looking at cross-device. We're thinking of laptops. We're thinking of kiosk display screens. We're thinking of mobile, a variety of sizes of handheld mobiles. And it's really important to know where those handoffs are. Do you have someone who's going to be working on a laptop and all of a sudden they have to go to an iPad mini? And at the end, you can work with appearance. Working with the industrial internet at GE, we have a pattern library, so we're trying to develop a coherent and consistent look and feel. So, which is good for GE brandings, that you can look at something and see it's a GE product, but it's also good for everyone to realize how we're creating this topic. Designers also can't run off to your fortress of solitude, design by yourself, and then throw things over the wall. This is something that's really changed in the last couple of years. Designers have to be in the mix. You're going to have to be in a co-located team and working together with your business owners and your developers and be able to own a process. We thought start with design thinking. We can take a lot of learnings from lean startup, and then once we have more of an idea of what we're building, dive into agile software development. UX can participate all through these. Another learning, once you start establishing yourself with the team and you want to see what is going on, most of the time you'll be working with existing software tools. There are a few opportunities where you're coming with something brand new, but existing software tools are challenging, to say the least. There are complex ecosystems and flows. This is something I'm working on right now that's trying to integrate 3 or 4 different databases internationally and working with 4 different teams globally. So the scale of the problem is a lot larger. You have to be very respectful of the existing tools. There are a lot of teams out there who have already designed something and spent a lot of time and a lot of effort in .NET creating something, and you just can't bash it. You have to be respectful about what worked, what was a challenge, and easily coax along the team about why changing certain aspects will be more beneficial for both the end user and the team developing it. You also get a great opportunity to see pretty amazing things in Excel. This is an Excel spreadsheet that one of my end users created because we're going to replace this tool. This is freaking amazing. This is where an MRI pings a big database, and he gets that information and plops it into this spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet tells him what's going wrong with the MRI. It's brilliant. I hope whatever me and my team come up with can duplicate this. It's just amazing. So there are lots and lots of really smart people out there. They want to do their jobs better. They want to do their jobs quicker. They want to do their jobs more efficiently and more accurately. So dive into the environment and see what people are trying to create by themselves. You also find out all sorts of interesting things, like people are dependent upon a CRM that right now can only be viewed in IE8. And you're integrating with this. And you're dealing with a business problem like, wow, what do we do? Are we going to leave this by the wayside, or are we just going to bite the bullet and spend the development time to create an IE8? Are we going to wait a year until they're ready for IE10? It's a big challenge. And you have to just recognize that people really want to do their job well. They're trying hard. It's stunning watching someone interacting with an interface like this, and they know it by the back of their hand. And you have to be very respectful and show a lot of empathy that someone wants to do their job well. To that end, you've got to get out of the building. This, working with industrial internet, it's not like guerrilla user testing where you can just go down to the Starbucks with a paper prototype and show prototypes to people. We're talking about a larger scale. So this is a great quote from Alan Patton, which I adore. Design doesn't come from your head. It's solving the real world problems by getting out of the building and seeing what's going on. And the stuff you see may involve you taking cold and warm water helicopter self-rescue, so you can go to a drill ship. This is a 3 or 4 story drill. One of my colleagues went to see this recently. And that is the person they're designing this for. What's his interaction? Being empathetic to what he's trying to do and the job he's trying to do. Which is pretty cool. You get to go do, this is one of my colleagues at a drilling platform, me at a cardiovascular lab in Germany, because I needed to see how did our end users interact with the software platform. And one of the individuals that I interviewed in Kansas City about how they work with their cardiovascular lab. Getting onto the building is challenging, but it's really useful. You can't depend upon experts to tell you how people use it. You have to see how people are actually using the product or want to use the product. You also have to remember as you're ideating different ideas that what you're doing is not a beautiful thing in itself. We're not creating art. People have a job to do. So at the same time, while we want to create something fantastic, we're creating a piece of software that allows someone to do their job better. So in a way, the best we can do is become invisible, something they don't even think about. People have very limited time. They have very limited attention spans. We don't want someone reading a manual because we know that no one reads a manual. Nobody reads, they scan. So how can you give them complex information in a soundbite that can fit their cognitive model when they've got something else going on in the background so they can do their job more efficiently? At the same time, there are loads of expectations you have to waive. And the expectations are uniform globally. It's mobile. Everybody doesn't want that sucky CRM example I just showed earlier. They want to be able to see it just as beautifully on their iPhone. So you have to weigh it back and forth. They want that ease of use. They don't even think about what they've got in their hand. It just lets them do what they need to do. So going back to your weighing all these different elements, you go back to your team and you're thinking about creating a hypothesis, cross-functionally. Now you don't get to do this all the time, but it's really good to come back to the team and think about why are we doing this and how will we know we're successful. It's not that we just finished it on time and we sold the product. It's that we're building this for someone, so how will we know that we built the right product? And then also, how can we validate and vet? We want to do an iteration. What are we looking for? So with your cross-functional team, think about very standard lean startup approaches to creating a hypothesis. We believe that in 4-2 we'll achieve, and we will know we're successful when. Very standard lean approach. And this is a really great exercise to do with your cross-functional team because it gets the whole team to really drill down on who are your users and what exactly do you want them to do, and thinking about success criteria and metrics. Metricing enterprise industrial software products is not like the consumer. You can't just hook in Google Analytics and see how it's performing. It's a lot more subtle, and there are a lot of issues involving that you're working with third-party proprietary data. Talking about data, you're going to see very crappy data. That while we want people to do great jobs, we are also sucking in a lot of data and giving analytics at the same time. And the data will be lousy. It just will be. This is a great quote from Jeffrey Hurt, who is a data scientist at the University of Washington. It's an absolute myth that you can send an algorithm over any raw data and have insights pop up. The data is going to be lousy because right now we're finding out that people are not incentivized to define data consistently. That's not their job. Nor are they incentivized to collect data consistently. So you have to go into what you have and see what you've got, and working back and forth with the end user, what is meaningful and what has to change. Which means you're going to rock the boat. The product that you're coming up with is going to show things that previously were tribal knowledge. Every 3 or 4, 6 months, someone would do a report, data mine, and have huge spreadsheets, and that would say something. What you're going to present is going to show close to real time how people are performing. And this is a lot of uncomfortable situations. And that's not why my role is change management, but it's going to happen because then you start to reveal to the end users that one, their data collection is crappy, and if you want to show the insights from your data, you've got to change your work situation so people will collect the data you want to collect. 2, it illuminates performance issues. And while that's not what I do, how to address performance issues, it's showing it right there. Which goes into another issue of you push for meaningful iterations. While I would love to take this existing piece of software and tear it all down and push it for something fantastic, sometimes you have to start with little changes because there are constraints for various reasons. One could be a CRM that's still stuck in IE8. One could be that you have just less development time, or you have a shorter development circle. So you can have an existing interface, and then maybe you just realize, like, wow, it's presenting lots of information at the same time. How is this information meaningful to the end user? Maybe there's an information hierarchy. Maybe we only need to present to them what is relevant up front, and everything else goes at the bottom. Start with something small. So it could be just an order of information. So the industrial internet is helping people work. That's what we're doing. There are big machines that suck in lots and lots and lots of data, and that data can be massaged and turned into analytics and get going. And people want to do their job efficiently, and they want to make informed decisions. And that's the promise of the industrial internet. So when situations happen where the wind turbine, we always anthropomorphize locomotives and trains and things. You can go out there and take care of it. So don't make something unless it's both necessary and beautiful. But if it's both necessary and useful, make it beautiful. This is a great quote from Brooklyn Data that was last week. I wish I could have gotten that. So that's what I have right now. I went through it pretty quickly. We're hiring at GE at various levels. And if anybody has any questions about designing user experience for industrial internet, I'd be happy.
Okay, so that picture of the touchscreen interface.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a background in the industry. What struck me about it was I don't see how you can ever close the feedback loop with that guy, because he's afraid if he criticizes the current change, that he's going to lose his job. The management is going to clamp down on him. So how do you get to honesty there?
That's a really good question. It's about going.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question is, how do you get to honesty from a guy who's using a touchscreen interface on a drilling rig when he's terrified of his management and he's terrified of criticizing the current round of changes that are happening?
I haven't worked in that particular situation, but what I've seen is performance metrics. That there's usually things are taking longer or processes are more expensive. So you can just observe and see one of these two things is occurring, so you don't have to put the poor guy on the spot.
Okay.
But you can propose solutions that are going to address one of those two business concerns. And I get great traction saying that a design solution will address one of these two concerns.
I have something related. So you said, the person you showed on the screen was if you're trying to help that person, and in the data that's going to come out,
right,
you also reference that it's going to be a bit intimidating for potentially some of the decision makers because it's probably different from the kind of knowledge that the user.
Right.
So let me understand how do you traverse that? Because now this information is sort of fact-based, and in the past there was some more, heuristics or whatever, intuition, whatever they use. I'm just curious, how do you get past the, now kind of fact-based and sort of contradict perhaps what you were doing in the past?
Honestly, I don't know about that. That is one of the large, big questions that is going on in some industries. Not all industries, but in some where you have data insights that change management, where we just present it to one of our end users, saying, and the end users know in their gut tribally that this was an issue. Now they have evidence that they need to address the issue.
So who are you selling to then? Are you selling to the higher level management so that they can then make the right decisions? Because this intermediate layer may actually get intimidated.
Oh, these are great questions. I don't sell software, so I don't know. But I know that we appeal to more higher level management, but then everyone knows that the new software will not be effective and will not be used unless you bring along anyone who has to use it. So those individuals have to be seen, have to be included in the conversation, and need to know that this is going to make their job easier more efficient. I was in an on-site where I had great suspicion of one participant of the data that we were presenting, because he thought, well, you're going to cut my budget, you're going to make me work longer and make me work harder. And we had to work hand in glove with the administrator of the facility and say, no, you're right, there is cost coming down. What we're trying to do is make sure that you don't have to stay overtime if you don't want to. If you want to go home at 6 o'clock, we're going to work the schedule, be able to say that you can leave by 6 o'clock. So you have to change it to the end user benefit. And it's hard. That's a plan that I work on.
I had a question about your cross-functional team. So do you employ or contract or consult with subject matter folks? And like for the cardiac thing, you have physicians on staff that help you build out the software, or the nurses? Because I did medical software for 10, 12 years, so we had physicians on staff, we had some nurses, we had clinicians. So I was just curious, how does GE go about doing these verticals of their software?
Right, yeah, because the domains are very technical and the knowledge is really, really deep. It depends on the vertical. On medical, the project I was on, we had a subject expert. So the business owner was our subject expert because he'd been in the field for 10 or 15 years. I thought it was fabulous because then we could push more to get to the end users in the field rather than depending upon a doctor who was on staff or a nurse who was on staff. So we had to go on site and interview the individuals who were administering the tool and working with it, which is a fairly new approach for GE. They've always had using subject matter experts, and we're pushing it, and we've actually had to get in the field and see what people are doing. I'm sorry, we started a little early because there was time and we thought we did. But if you came just now thinking I was going to start at 4:30, I could give a presentation again because I've got another half an hour. And if you don't want to see the repeat broadcast of this, and let's just start with the individual who left me on use his computer, feel free to leave and I can start the presentation again and I won't talk so fast.
Personally, I missed the beginning.
Yeah.
Start over. Let's do this over and I'll go slower.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, and if you have any questions? Yeah, thank you. Get started. We'll start with the second one, and then I got 3 minutes. Okay, so industrial internet. So the industrial, when we think about the Internet of Things, we think of devices that help me perceive my world and are connected to the Internet. We also think about devices that can tell me about me. A watch, but also interact with the internet, and devices that can tell even more about me. This is a really cool vest that's being used in hospitals right now that can give biometric data. We also think about, in the Internet of Things, about connecting objects like Nest. I want to see what's going on with the energy consumption in my house or buildings, and seeing them on a phone so that I can adjust it. What I'm going to talk about is larger scaled industrial internet. So big things like offshore drills and cardiovascular laboratories and jet engines and locomotives. GE makes all these things. And it's really hard to wear a locomotive on your wrist. But all these objects have sensors in them. And they're creating lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of data. And all of the data is software and being drilled down to a
I see it. I'll get it to you.
use, both interacting with it and learning how it's behaving. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. Is about how do you create the industrial. How do you create a user experience for the best scale of issue? So there's a lot of similarities to consumer software development. There's a lot of similarities to industrial software development. And there's a lot of things that are just unusual because you're talking about really big things. So one of the first things, you start with a cross-functional team. It helps tremendously from the get-go, because you have a business owner who's going to probably sell the software, and he's thinking about what's viable in the industry space, be it aviation, healthcare, transportation, oil and gas, lighting. You have feasibility. You have software developers, both front-end, back-end, full stack, who can tell you what's going on. And we have desirability, which is me. User experience designer, about who are these people who are going to use this piece of software, and how's this data going to do, and why do we want to build this? What is this going to do for somebody? So UX is both starting at the bottom and going up, and starting at the top and going down. We can do appearance, we can do quick sketches that allow the team to communicate, because pictures really help. If you draw pictures, people say, oh, you need that, rather than huge, long Excel spreadsheets of requirements, which are just painful to read. And then starting from the bottom, getting the team to realize that we think about the value. What is this piece of software going to do for the end user? Who is the end user? What will it do for them? And then how are they going to interact with it? Because industrial internet is cross-device. I can have someone who is working on a laptop, and then I have someone who works on a touch screen, and then someone who goes onto a variety of handhelds. And it's really important to know where those transition points are, and also where are they going to be. If I have a guy, a repair guy, for an MRI, who's going to the basement to repair the MRI, he has no connectivity, which means that before he goes into the basement to check on the MRI, he's got to download his information about what's wrong with the MRI and how to repair it before he goes into the basement. So there's a lot of situations, things you have to think about. Going back to the team, UX designers can't escape and go off to our fortresses of solitude and come up with great ideas to hand over the team. You're going to have to be in the mix, and that means working with a lot of very standard software development approaches. UX is very successful in industrial internet when we speak the same language as developers. So starting with design thinking, you don't have to call it design thinking, you can call it research up front. Then using lean startup approaches, and then going into an agile software development cycle. If UX designers own this process, we can drive the conversation with our colleagues and come up with meaningful products every sprint. So going back to what the project is, now that you're aligned with your team and you're all working together and you know where you're going to go, what is the problem we're solving? Well, one thing you will find out very quickly is that the data and tools are very poorly integrated. The complexity of the issue for existing scenarios is humongous. This is something I'm working on right now, where it's an MRI, it's a global product, it's talking to 4 or 5 different databases, and the communication protocols are going all around each other. That the workflow streams are very complicated. Sometimes it's better to start with something small, want a proof of concept, then we can grow, but it's very challenging. You have to be respectful of what exists already. A team spent a lot of time and effort and pride creating this in .NET. I can't go in and tell them it sucks. That would just be not good. What I can do is be respectful and ask them what was challenging and bring them along in the conversation that their end users, while this was crafted with pride, their end users are having challenges. They're not as effective, they're not as efficient. And what can we do together? And enlist the previous creators' assistance, and together, let's come up with a solution. I've got a couple ideas. Why don't we work together and see if we together, and then we'll vet it with the end users. We can come up with a better solution. You will see amazing things. This is an Excel spreadsheet that a guy who repairs an MRI, the MRI pings to a database and says, I am sick. And this guy then takes that code and plops it into this Excel spreadsheet, which is hooked up to another database, and it tells him what's wrong. I'm stunned with the complexity of this. I hope the product I come up with is just as amazing as this. So use tribal knowledge. There are people out there making really cool things. And really, you're not going to come up with all the ideas by yourself. See what's out there and see what people are doing. You also come up with situations like this. This is a CRM that can only be read in IE8. It is a business decision whether we will support this now or wait till this third-party CRM that GE does not know, works with. Wait until they upgrade to IE10. This is a large business consideration, which will impact the product delivery. Because if we have to support IE8, it's going to be more delivery time and more QA time. And it's stunning us in our tracks right now. You have to remember that people want to do a job. And they're working really, really hard with existing tools. I did not design this. This is the existing software that I'm going to replace. But they're trying really hard with very complicated software to get their job done. And you have to be empathetic to the situation that you're in. So to be empathetic, you get out of the building. Now, working with industrial internet doesn't mean that you can go down to the cafe with a paper prototype and ask people to, for 25 bucks, a gift card for 25 bucks for coffee, would you please play with my paper prototype? This can mean going to an offshore drill in another country and talking to this guy who probably doesn't speak English and working with a translator. It could mean having to take cold water helicopter self-rescue so you can take a helicopter to the drilling platform. It can mean going to Kansas City, which I did recently, to talk to people who work in a cardiovascular laboratory because they have relationships with GE. So you have to be willing and flexible and know that it's not going to be a perfect user experience, user research protocol. You have to sort of go with the flow because people are there to do a job and you're grateful that they're going to give you half an hour or 40 minutes whenever they're available. So this is one of my colleagues at a drilling platform. This is me at a cardiovascular laboratory in Germany because I wanted to talk to them, see how the doctors were interacting with a particular software. And this is one of the individuals I talked to in Kansas City. You get to meet great people. It's challenging. And while you're coming up with great ideas, you have to remember that what you're doing isn't beautiful. It's not art. I'm creating something so somebody can do their job. So you have to remember that whoever you're creating this for has a very short time span. They have a very they have a very high cognitive load because usually something else is going on. The MRI is broken, the something is broken, what's going on? So you have to design for something that's scannable, easy to read, intelligible, and they can consume easily. This is for repair stuff. For the analytic part, it's a little bit different, but it's similar. That said, the expectations we're finding out globally are pretty high. You can see the painful stuff that people are working with right now. Everybody says, why can't this be as easy to use as my iPhone? I heard that in Germany, I'm hearing that in Asia, I'm hearing that in Kansas City. I just want this to be as easy as what my mom can do on my iPhone. Yeah, it might be a laptop, yeah, it might be an iPad, but why can't it be as easy as this? So we have to keep on going back to consumer applications and seeing the paradigms and the cognitive load for some complicated processes and how people are addressing those, because the reference points are always there. For me, yay, the day is here. It's the consumerization of enterprise software. Finally, everyone realizes that no one's going to read a manual. You can't train somebody. They want to be able to just dive in and be able to do it up front. So going back to your team, now that you understand all these things, we believe in the lean startup. You create a hypothesis. With your cross-functional team, get together and focus on, there's so much to look at and there's so much to drill into. Let's try to be very clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And most importantly, how are we going to know we're successful? Yes, we can finish the project on time within budget. Yes, the stakeholder can be able to sell it. But why am I doing this? How will we know this is a successful product? Because you want to definitely see how does it do in the marketplace and justify your budget if you want to iterate on it. So this is a very easy, very basic lean startup approach. Going back to your product, you realize that you will see crappy data, like big time crappy data, because folks in industrial internet, this is not their job to either clearly define, consistently define what their data is, nor is it their job to consistently take in the data. Their job is to do their job. So you have to just realize there's going to be crappy data and you have to work with your end user and see what's meaningful and see what's missing. Jeffrey here is a data scientist at the University of Washington. He's been doing a lot of work on data analytics. He's really, really smart. He's a fun guy. And while you're looking at the data, you're going to find out that your product is going to rock the boat. Because what you're going to pull out from analytics is things that people knew in their gut. It was tribal knowledge. But now you're actually going to show it. And yes, the data could be crappy, but you'll go through it and you'll come and you say, look, this is actually what we're seeing, that Dr. X is late 33% of the time. Or Dr. Y does take longer for this particular procedure, well, because he's dealing with the older, sicker patients. Everybody knows that. So that's something I haven't really gone into, but I'm excited to find out about the change management, where one, you have people who are going to have to be incentivized to consistently define data, two, be able to consistently capture data, and then organizationally, the changes that can occur by analytics. Thinking about your product, you can push for meaningful iterations. You might be constrained by time, budget, resources. So what can you do for the end user within these constraints? It might be something as simple as the one on the far left is the existing metrics, where it's a whole bunch of charts all put together and they're shown all the time. And we're talking to the end users and they go, actually, when the MRI alarm comes in, there's only 3 or 4 charts we really need to see up front. And they vary depending on the alarm. So we're asking our developers, saying, hey, how about we just show, if we don't have time, we'll use the existing presentation of the charts, but just show the one that's relevant up top and show all the other ones on the bottom. And we'll work on the presentation later, but just show the most relevant ones in the front. And they're thinking about it. Okay, that'll be a good thing to do. The industrial internet is to help people work. And it's not a beautiful thing. But I think it's really cool, because we're creating software that's a very, very complicated, big object. And either it's going to let someone do their job faster, or more efficiently, or more carefully, less dangerously. and also give insights on how that big object, be it a jet engine or a locomotive, is performing. So you can have no unplanned downtime. You can do preventive maintenance. Oh, it looks like it's going to go down over the next 6 months. Why don't we take it offline and take care of it now? So we can rearrange our schedule and everything's going to be, we can stay on our schedule. We all like to anthropomorphize our objects. So the idea is that the objects can tell us what's going on with them, and we can respond appropriately. This is a great quote from Jesse Gardner, who was at Brooklyn Beta recently, that don't make something unless it's both necessary and useful. But if it's both necessary and useful, make it beautiful. Make it useful. And that's my talk. I'd be happy to talk to you. That's me. Any questions? Sure.
So I see a lot of information that seems to assume that that the decision makers that you're designing for are essentially human beings capable of making irrational decisions, so to speak, or at least making suboptimal decisions. I'm wondering if you guys have encountered any ways of formatting or surfacing information in a manner so as to decrease or produce optimal decision-making results. In other words, have you guys done any work with behavioral economics or prospect theory, anything that would define the way that the people are looking at things and force an action?
I haven't myself, but I have colleagues who are looking at that. Where we want people to make smart decisions, and through design patterns that we do in the presentation information hierarchy of what we're doing, we can tell them when something is a really bad decision. But then again, you can't save the user. The end user is going to do, when it comes to manipulating the device, they're going to do what they're going to do. You could just tell something like, well, I wouldn't do that. You could do that, but I wouldn't do that. You could also tell them when something is really bad, or something is somewhat bad. We're also giving them the ability to change those baselines themselves. It's institution by institution or object by object. So giving them the leeway to decide for them what is good and what is bad.
So you're kind of setting up intelligent defaults and different scales of evaluation per organization is what you're saying? You also mentioned that, you mentioned a lot of talk about data accessibility, specifically making things accessible for non-technicals, people that need to decide. Do you see the job of industrial internet as then, or do you see the market challenge of industrial internet in your work as primarily marketing then to these non-technical decision makers, or to the technical staff that inform? It seems to be coming up a lot in these talks about who exactly are marketing.
There's two things. In an industrial internet, I don't say consumer, my customer, because my customer is the executive who is buying the locomotive or the cardiovascular laboratory system. That is my customer. My end user is the individual who will either be interacting with it or taking data assets from it. A lot of people realize that when you sell a product, it has to go both ways. That you have to show the efficiencies of using the software to the executive that is going to save time and save money. At the same time, you have to list the participation of who's actually going to use it by testing it throughout, that one, it's usable and it's meaningful, and then also that it will save time and save money. I did a test with something in Kansas City where I was met with great suspicion by an older physician that what I'm showing will cut his budget and leave him less time. And we had to rephrase it. Thankfully, we were warned about this situation beforehand by an administrator. We rephrased it. We said, actually, what we're hoping to do is make us as a father, that we'll be able to schedule what's going on in the cardiovascular laboratory more efficiently, because you'll be able to see what's going on in the day. And you'll be able to schedule it so you won't have to save your overtime. But it's a big challenge.
Are these typically run as consulting engagements, or are you looking forward to productizing the output of these efforts?
I'm in the productization.
Okay.
I'm not in the consulting arm. I'd love to do something both because I can see being user experience. I can see it easily doesn't change management. And that's the work on the product side.
But it seems like there's a high component of customization in these examples you gave?
Highly customized.
Okay.
Highly customized. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Anything else? I want to thank our colleague right here who lent me his laptop. So thank you so much for listening to my second